Dune, or Dune Part 1 as it's titled on the screen. So Dune is the second adaptation of Frank Herbert's novel of the same name, the previous film being by David Lynch in 1984. Now I will say before I start talking about the film that I haven't actually seen the 1984 version by David Lynch, and I haven't read the novel either. So my expectations of this were quite open, and I wasn't really sure what to expect, to be honest. And judging from fan reaction, from the trailer and from everything else, it just seemed like it was going to be a huge extravaganza of event cinema and would be a pinnacle of the science fiction genre in 21st century. But judging from the reception that I know about from the 1984 film, it flopped and it wasn't particularly popular among critics either. And judging from 21st century fantasy cinema and television, we have had a lot of high production films where there is a lot more scale to the story and the visual effects are off the charts, and they've just expanded the whole world even more within that particular series, such as the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Hobbit trilogy, Interstellar, and even Avatar. But regardless though, there have been a lot of talks in recent years about making a new adaptation of Dune. But the biggest question mark for me going into this film was that where is it going to fit in amongst the other 21st century high production fantasy stories? Where's the gap in the woods for it, basically? So Dune is set in a galactic world set way into the future, as we follow the journey of Paul Atreides, who along with his father and fellow kinsmen travel across space to a dangerous desert planet called Arrakis. However, in doing so, Paul and his people get caught up in a war between two native groups. So as I've already mentioned, Dune is based on the novel by Frank Herbert, and judging from that film alone, it definitely has the capability and the potential to become a duology and even a trilogy. A bit like how The Hobbit was, where it was just basically one book, but they spread it out into 3 films, and this one could be exactly the same. And the film was made by visionary director Denis Villeneuve, who is already an established filmmaker in the science fiction genre, having previously done Blade Runner 2049 and Arrival. So I think because he's made huge science fiction films in the past, I feel as though this one, he just takes it to a whole new level in terms of production. A bit like how James Cameron approached Avatar, and just making a big massive science fiction film for the audience to just experience, just the attention to detail in every aspect, close-up shots of specific things, from wide shots of all the planes and all the jets and all the creatures. It just created this huge extravaganza that I think is probably at the very highest any science fiction or fantasy film could possibly get, and I think that is Dune's greatest achievement. But what I will say though is that, and maybe it's because I haven't seen the 1984 film or read the novel, I just felt that the story lacked heart at times. And when you've got a story that depends so much on production values, you need a story that's equally as engaging as well. And there were times when I was a little bit like confused really as to what was even going on. There were times when I just felt like we didn't entirely click, because we had moments that introduced the background context of the entire story, a bit like in Lord of the Rings when they had the prologue, and you got that in this film as well. I just think as some things developed a little bit more, we just didn't kind of grasp the emotion of what was happening, and that was only through the visuals rather than the actual screenwriting and dialogue within the story. So maybe I'll think differently after watching the sequel, and maybe after a rewatch of this, but judging from first time viewing, I just couldn't entirely grasp the emotion of the story. But don't get me wrong, there were moments that did have that, but I just think ultimately the visuals outweighed the narrative structure. And speaking of production values, a massive shout out to Hans Zimmer, who is arguably up there among the greatest film composers of all time, and he is quite well known for these epic scores, and this one is no different, because his music just really enhanced the huge experience of watching this, and just accompanying the visuals just made it an even bigger film to watch. It was just incredible how they just synchronized so well, and it just worked absolutely brilliantly. Timothée Chalamet plays the role of Paul, and he's already a rising star in the film industry and has already been in some fantastic films. He's only in his 20s, he's had an Oscar nomination, and he's also had a supporting role in the 2014 film Interstellar. Bit of a coincidence actually, seeing as I mentioned that film earlier. But I feel as though Paul is a typical protagonist within science fiction and fantasy, because he's born into a family where his destiny is pretty much pre-decided for him before it even takes off. And when we follow Paul on this journey, we understand that he has some troubles and he has limited capabilities, particularly within his own mind. And you see his journey as the film progresses. Now, Rebecca Ferguson plays Lady Jessica Atreides, who is Paul's mother, and her character angle is somewhat interesting. We're introduced to her as someone who's like a mentor to him, not just as a parent, but as someone who leads and helps him on his journey to fulfill that destiny and achieve his mission. And what is interesting about her role in this is that when you've got fantasy films over the years that have involved a hero and a heroine, they're either strangers who become lovers or they are lovers already. Here it's a mother and son, and they follow each other in the journey together, and usually it kind of counteracts that stereotypical representation of a man and a woman within a fantasy film, and that's what I think is really kind of unique and different about it, because you don't see it all that often, and it just kind of broke that kind of representation anyway. Other actors in this film include Oscar Isaac, who plays Duke Leto Atreides, Josh Brolin as Atreides' weapons master, Javier Bardem as the leader of the Freemen, and Dave Bautista as the right-hand man / nephew of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. But one performance I thought particularly was fantastic was Stellan Skarsgård as Vladimir Harkonnen, because you could just hear from his trademark slurry deep voice the menace and the manipulative ways of the character. And when you look at him visually, I know there's been a lot of visuals and makeup added to Skarsgård's image. He's an abject villain where he just appears disgusting, therefore he's menacing, and you could really feel that through Skarsgård's performance. Ultimately, Dune was a very, very good film. The visuals were absolutely off the chart, they were fantastic, and the production scale was just awe-inspiring. It was really, really good. Technically, there weren't any faults at all, I don't think. Although I think, just for me, the narrative structure could have been a little bit clearer, and it just lacked heart and soul, basically. And that was one aspect where I was a little bit disappointed. But with future installments coming out soon, including a sequel which has had an official announcement that it's going to be released in 2023, hopefully we will get a bigger picture of this universe, and it will become even bigger than it's already become with just this one film alone. What did you think of Dune? Do you think it was as good as the original film? Do you think it's better than the novel? Or do you think it's just worse? Let me know in the comments below anyway, and I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, then please hit that like button and subscribe for more, and have a notification bell tick so you're notified when I upload a new video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, everybody.